per usual, these webinars serve a purpose, and the aim, of course, is to grow the sport of volleyball in our province by empowering aspiring and young coaches, our teachers who locked in, administrators, or just anyone keen, to get involved with the sport. We acknowledge our colleagues from outside the province and even, from outside of South Africa, and appreciate the interest shown. Very warm welcome to all of you. By the end of the webinars, we hope that all attendees would have grown in one or more specific area. We also hope that we can continue with building a network of human resources that, of course, include you guys, coaches that's logging in regularly, volunteers, administrators, referees, statisticians, or wannabe statisticians, and so much more. And also, of course, we should keep supporting each other even after the completion of the webinars. We are therefore very grateful for partners such as DCAS, the schools, different regional clubs, our federations, and all other interested parties. So just before I introduce our first presenter, a reminder of some house rules. Try and minimize distractions and noise levels as much as possible, and please do engage in the sessions after the presenters has finished. You can also, as usual, you can type your questions and comments in the chat box, and for us to just follow up on that afterwards. So our first speaker tonight, Mr. Claude Meyer. He's, of course, well known in the sporting arena in South Africa. I met him at the Western Cape Sports School and got to know him as somebody who's very passionate about, the sporting fraternity. We are actually fortunate to have a gentleman of his caliber sharing valuable information to us. So just to introduce Mr. Meyer, he comes from a teaching background, having obtained his teacher's diploma at the Hewitt College. He then advanced to a fourth-year qualification at UCT, majoring in advanced mathematics. So for all those struggling, to get through those formulas, feel free to contact Mr. Meyer. He obtained a project management qualification from the University of Stellenbosch and has achieved his Western Province colours in football at both school level and provincial level. Mr. Meyer has 22 years of school sport experience. He has 10 years of club coaching experience and 5 years administration experience at the LFA level. And he has 37 years experience as a referee. So Mr. Meyer certainly knows his football and understand it all very well. So don't mess with him, guys. He is, of course, currently holding the position as Deputy Director of School Sport Development at the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport. And therefore, who best to talk to us about creating pathways for school-going athletes? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Claude Meyer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clutie. Good evening to everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I feel really privileged. I want to just make sure that all the gremlins out of the way can all hear me.
Good.
Okay. I'm not too sure, Almin or Ms. Clutie, if you were speaking about the same person, but anyway, I'll try my best.
The very same.
I'll try my best. Colleagues, I think we all, I don't have to repeat it, we're obviously all going through a very tough time, and sport has really ground to a standstill in many cases, especially at amateur level. Professional sport is slowly being phased in, the different codes of sport in our country and across the world. So the question is, how ready are we going to be once amateur sport is then reintroduced? And obviously preparing for what everybody's referring to as the new normal. I'm going to be speaking mostly about, obviously, school sport and creating pathways for athletes, both in mass participation for those kids and the youth who just want to participate in mass participation, But I think more specifically, and this is where the federation and the various federations in the various codes play a very critical role in their role as custodian of sport at all levels in their respective codes of sport. The question is, how are we going to be able to get sport at school level and sport at club level and at the various other levels? How are we going to be able to get it going again? I think a lot of clubs, or many clubs, are obviously struggling. I want to thank the Western Cape Volleyball Federation for this great initiative. I believe it is webinar number 6. And I think you guys are leading the way, and I'm sure that the other codes can take a leaf out of your book and see how they can also get their respective codes of sport going. So if we can just go to the third slide, the first one, sorry, just the background, if that can just be put up, COVID-19 level 3 period and beyond. We'll just move to the next slide. So I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but it's obviously, I mean, we're all experiencing the same things. If one is looking at amateur sport, at school level, nothing is happening. If I can maybe just give a little bit of background. The Department of Basic Education at national level, and hence the various provincial departments, in our case, the Western Cape Education Department, there's a guideline out that there's no extra and no co-curricular activities at schools. So there's nothing happening, there's no coaching taking place, there's no practices taking place. The focus at the moment is really on catch up as far as the academics is concerned. And we're talking now specifically in level 3. I'm not too sure what phase of level 3 we are in. I believe there's an advanced phase, but whatever. And we're obviously going to be moving towards level 2 and level 1 of the lockdown. So there's no practice sessions taking place. There's no participation, not only at school level, but obviously at amateur club level. There's no physical meetings, and hence we're having webinars. There's very little talent identification taking place at the different levels of sport. Social interaction is bare minimum, and there's no amateur club participation. If we move across to the right-hand side, when we are moving to either level 2 or level 1, depending on the regulations, how are we going to be able to assist clubs and schools to have phased-in practice sessions? Obviously, with the various medical protocols, how ready are we? And then obviously participation at amateur level, and that is where the clubs come in. How are we going to deal with meetings going forward? Are we going to continue having virtual meetings, or are we going to have it virtual and or physical meetings? How are we going to get talent identification up and running again? How are we going to manage increased social interaction? Because at the moment, I'm sure you will understand that there's a lot of breaking of the lockdown laws. And if sport should be allowed to proceed, there's obviously going to be strict protocols in place. And how are we going to manage that? Both at school level and at club level. And I maybe just want to emphasize the fact that the federation structures, and I'll touch on it later, you are the custodians of sport at all levels, whether it be school, whether it be club level, whether it be participation at tertiary level, whether it's mass participation or competitive or next level participation. How ready are we, and how are we going to prepare for that? And then lastly, how are we going to be able to manage the phased-in approach of amateur club participation? So the focus really is, how do we synchronize all of these various activities, obviously using the base of mass participation, starting right from ECD level in recreation, getting kids to play sport again at an age of 3 or 4, when they enter the school system at primary school level, at high school level, and ultimately, hopefully getting kids to be joining clubs. And I want to speak a little bit about that link later on. So we move on to the second slide. The second slide speaks particularly to recreation and sport participation. It refers to roles and responsibilities. There are 6 levels of participation in school sport. Levels 1, 2, 3, that falls in the domain of the Education Department, both at national level, DBE, Department of Basic Education, and in our province, the Western Cape Education Department. And that is mass participation. That is the basis of sport taking place at schools, whether it be inter-class, inter-school, inter-house, right up to district level where the circuits play against each other. And that is the responsibility of the Education Department, both nationally as well as provincially. Levels 4, 5, and 6, that is the responsibility of sport and recreation. Now, I'm sure you all know that SRSA, Sport and Recreation South Africa, is now merged with the Department of Arts at national level. They are now referred to as DSAC. That stands for the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. And that is our mother department at national level. And the responsibility at national level of DSAC, that transcends to provinces, and in our case, that is DCAS, the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport. So our responsibility kicks in at provincial level. That is level 4. That is where the districts play against each other for talent identification. It speaks about high performance centers where we work with the various federations. And that also would include the various levels of competition at provincial and national. And then level 6 is your inter-provincial competitions when we go to the SA schools, national championships, the winter games, summer games, and the various other editions. There's one additional level of participation which we are responsible for, and that is international competitions, when our talented athletes, they represent our country against other countries. And I maybe just want to just chat a little bit around that, in that levels 1, 2, and 3, which is school-based competitions, we work hand in hand with the Western Cape Education Department, but they are then responsible for levels 1, 2, and 3. Once the talent identification and the activities kicks in at provincial level, inter-district, where Eden competes against Central Karoo, Overberg, Cape Winelands, the Metro, West Coast, that is where our responsibility kicks in as provincial Department of Culture, Affairs and Sport. And that is where we link with the federations. You'll see on the far right-hand side, it's federation-based. So even though the federation is responsible for sport activities on all levels, our specific role kicks in at level 4 when it comes to provincial competitions. And that is where we work closely with the federation structure. So if a Western Cape volleyball schools team needs to be selected to go and compete in the winter games, well, this year we missed the winter games obviously because of COVID. The federation would be responsible for the selection of players, the athletes, the appointment of the managers and the coaches, and that is the responsibility. And we as the Provincial Department of Sport and Recreation, we give that support, where we procure with ring fence funding, we procure the transport, the attire, the accommodation, and all the other logistics in order for our athletes to go and compete against the other 8 provinces. I think when we are talking about a pathway for school-going athletes, that pathway has to work via the federation structure. So when learners are playing sport at the mass participation level, at school level, the ultimate is for those athletes to join clubs and for the federation to then obviously be in charge, for lack of a better word, of sport at the various levels of participation. And when it comes to representative teams representing our province, that is the responsibility of the federation. So the pathway that one wants to create through the federations is to ensure that there's a base for kids to play, whether they're playing at inter-class level, inter-house, inter-school, and then out of that base, the talent identification takes place through the federation. So that there must be two pipelines. One where the kid goes through the school system and represents schools, but the other pipeline should be where schools are linked to clubs or clubs adopt schools, and we get the talented athletes, or in some cases they may not be the most talented, but they want to play club level. And I'm sure most of us, we understand that because that's where we come from. But to give the learner the opportunity that during the week, he plays for his school, and over a weekend he plays for the club. That is one pathway that we should be investing in, and that is where the critical role of the federation takes place. Later on in one of the other slides, I will use some examples where there's a natural link, or there was a natural link between schools and clubs. And I'm sure, colleagues, we will agree that if we want South Africa to be a winning nation in the various codes of sport, we need to increase the participation at all levels. We need to improve the talent identification. We need to ensure that we are there to create a pathway for our learners. Whether they want to play at the mass participation level and just play for the rest of their lives, but particularly for a winning nation, how do we create a pathway to get the talented athletes to play sport? And I can almost guarantee you that in most codes of sport, and I'm sure in volleyball, I'm not an expert in volleyball, but I loved volleyball while I was at high school, but then I didn't grow to be 6 foot tall like some of you. So I was chucked out of the volleyball team at Livingston High. And they said, no, Meyer gaan speel football. But in order to get into a national team and to make our country win, we've got to strengthen our club system. We've got to strengthen our tertiary systems so that when learners are finished with matric, they don't just fall by the wayside. And that is the pathway that we need to push. And I'm sure you are doing it, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But in some cases, I think we tend to forget about it. And then we ask ourselves, hey, what happened to the talented player that was under 15 or under 16? And when he or she turns 18, there's not a pathway to a tertiary institution. There's no pathway for him to be playing or her to be playing club volleyball or club football. And then that talent is gone. It's not rocket science. I'm mindful of the time, so there's one or two slides. I will move on to slide number 3, recreation and sport progression. This you can read at your own time because I'm sure the presentation will, like it is normally, it will be emailed to you. But this is just a more in-depth breakdown of the various roles and responsibilities. But I'm maybe just going to start off very quickly with the base of sport is obviously recreation, where kids are exposed to sport at a very young age. And maybe that is one of our other challenges that we have in South Africa. We don't expose, in many cases, our learners or our children from the ages of 2, 3, and 4. In previous years, from the little bit of experience that I have in football is only started under 10 level. I grew up playing on the fields at Cape and District, William Herbert, but there was only under 10. And only much later, I think they've gone right down to under 7 now. And I think there's a push in football and in maybe some other codes to get under 5s to play as well. I'm sure that many of us will agree, the sooner the better. And even if kids can just play for fun, because obviously we don't want to have a competitive league for under 5s or under 7s, but for them just to play for fun, to get their ball and hand and eye coordination sorted out, and just to get that base going at the recreation level. Then if we move through the system, I'm just going to go down the middle. Physical education at schools are critical, and I'm sure we are all in favor of a more focused approach and a reintroduction of physical education at schools. At the moment, it's part of life orientation, and it's not a standalone curriculum or subject as we know it. But I think there's a focus now on getting physical education back into the education system, and we fully support that. We have the MOD program. I'm not going to go too much in detail with that, but I'm sure you're all aware of the MOD program. There are 181 MOD centers across the province. I can send some more information to you, and you can share that. And we also have what are called neighboring school centers, 134 across the province in the various districts. And that's one opportunity where the federation can actually link with either MOD center or the neighboring school center and to strengthen the clubs. We then have the school sport leagues, which is the education department, as I spoke about early on. And then we take over as DCAS with the federations for next level participation, levels 4, 5, and 6, as I mentioned early on. And then to link our athletes from school level to go and play club sport. And that is, again, the partnership between DCAS and the various federations. Slide number 4. Excuse me. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, the various levels of progression, not only for athletes, but for coaches as well. And again, we start off with an introduction where kids are just playing sport at a recreational level, and they move through the same steps that the previous slide spoke about. But ultimately, we want to push for our talented athletes to reach the top, which is the professional and the elite sport athletes, where they must excel. As the athletes move up, the coaches need to be moving up as well. It's no good us having, obviously, talented athletes, but we do not have coaches that can nurture that talent. And again, that forms part of the pipeline and the pathway that we need to create, working hand in hand with the various federations, so that we can create opportunities for not only our school-going athletes, but once they leave school. And that is where the clubs come in. Well, clubs obviously start while they are at school, but just to strengthen that relationship between schools and clubs. I think that we all have experience, colleagues, where you'll find that many clubs are struggling. They're struggling to maintain numbers. They're struggling to have competent administrators, and after a while, the club just disappears. And I think one of the reasons, it may not be the only reason, but one of the reasons is because there's no connection to schools in the communities. I'm aware of some clubs, unfortunately, and it's not volleyball, so I'm protected, Ms. Kluti, where they want to, for lack of a better word, they want to import players from other areas, and that is not sustainable. If you want to be a community-based club, you need to link with the schools in your community. You need to get your youth of that community off the streets. We need to create exciting and positive opportunities for our youth and for our youngsters and our school-going kids. And I think that's one of the main solutions to getting clubs to be more functional and to be sustainable. Many clubs have X amount of senior teams, but they have no junior teams, and then they get dock points because in many of the federations, I'm not sure how it works in volleyball, but in order to have senior teams, you need to have X amount of junior teams, and then people want to go and drive kids from area A to go and play in area B. In some cases, that's possible, where you have parents that are prepared and are able to transport their sons and daughters to a club in another area. But in most cases, it's not possible. I mean, we all know what happens in our areas that are historically disadvantaged. We need to create opportunities for the youth in the community to play for a club in that community. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is for the club to link up with schools, to adopt schools, to get a connection to that school, or to create opportunities so that the learners ultimately want to come and join that club and not want to go and walk 10 kilometers to go and play for another club, because that's not sustainable, as I said. So we need to obviously try to just push that link between schools and clubs. And as I said, to ensure that when we're talking about a pathway for the athletes, we need to ensure that the coaches, that they also move along a pathway so that they can remain up to date with the latest trends. Slide number 5. Excuse me. We move on to slide number 5 now. Moving from an active nation to a winning nation, the pipeline. There you'll see the various levels that I've mentioned in the previous slides. I'm not going to repeat them, but really just to create again an opportunity for learners from the age of 3 or 4 when they're at preschool to move through the school system, and ultimately when they end up in post-school, when they matriculate, are they able to play for the club or continue playing for the club? Or are we able to create another pipeline for them? And that is where the critical role of the tertiary institutions come in. And I know in the case of volleyball, there's a close link with the University of Western Cape. And there's also a close link with the University of Stellenbosch. And I think we need to promote that even more. If there are other universities, other tertiary institutions, are we getting athletes to play volleyball representing the colleges or the technicons, and not only the universities, because tertiary sport obviously covers the various tertiary institutions. So again, it's important that we create the different pipelines and pathways. I maybe just want to add lastly on this slide, it's no good us, and this is just my opinion, and I'm sure it's backed up a little bit with some research, and Mr. Hendricks, he normally speaks about this, and I'm sure that when he gets an opportunity again, he'll speak a little bit more about it. We cannot just hand out bursaries and scholarships to athletes to go to university or technicon or college or whatever, and then just leave them. Our youth, they are not ready, or many of them. For them to be having to deal with academic advancement, post-matric, and to maintain an interest in their code of sport, and to excel, they're going to need support. Not only from their parents, if their parents are able to do that, but from the federation structures, and particularly from the clubs, from the communities, because they travel to universities, they are long, they're away from home for quite the half a day or the full day. And when they come back late afternoon, evening, is there an opportunity for them to still practice for their clubs and then to play? Or are we so rigid with our times that we are saying if Johnny can't make it for a 5 o'clock practice, hard luck, he's not going to play on a Saturday. But meanwhile, Johnny has to study. Or Johnny has a late lecture and he only gets home at 7 o'clock the evening. It's again about giving that ongoing support to our talented athletes, not only school going, but those athletes that are obviously playing for the club itself. We move on to slide number 6. This is just an example of a high performance center, and I'm sure volleyball, in many cases you are aware of it because you are one of the pioneers where with DCAS, we've started high performance centers for school going athletes, talented athletes, in 7 codes of sport out of the 16. And that's a combination between the provincial federation that takes charge of the high performance center. So it would be Western Cape Volleyball Federation, it would be the school sports structure, the various stakeholders, and then obviously DCAS, where we provide support. There's a separate slide that I'm not going to share with you today because it will be shared in another presentation, where the specific roles and responsibilities are. The federation is laid out, the responsibility of the school sports structure, and the responsibility of DCAS. But most importantly, colleagues, it is the federation that drives the high performance center. And that is where we take talented athletes in volleyball, in the other codes of sport, and we get them together once a month or once every 2 months, and we get them to just concentrate on skills development, on emotional support, on getting them to move to the next level in sport, and not just to be playing for the sake of playing. But as I said, that slide will be thrashed out a little bit more at another opportunity. We move on to slide number 7. This one excites me, and I'm sure some of you will be able to reminisce. When I was at high school, I don't know how many years ago that was, Ms. Kluti, I think I'm a bit older than you, much older than you. I never played volleyball besides playing volleyball at primary school, because I was football mad, as you know. But I clearly remember when I was at Livingston in the 80s, volleyball was one of the most popular codes of sport. And I'm sure we all long for those days. Now, we can long for the days and do nothing about it, or we can long for the days and do something about it. So in the old days, it's there for you plain to see. I wasn't too familiar with Cathkin High School and Saints Volleyball, but I was familiar with Crestway because I grew up in Grassy Park and I know about the Retreat Volleyball Club. I wasn't too familiar with Harold Crescent District 6 Volleyball Club, but Heathfield High School and Black Panthers, I knew Black Panthers quite well. I had a couple of friends, some friends that ended up at Immaculata High. I can mention them by names, and they played for Black Panthers, and they came from Immaculata High, and then the boys, most of the athletes, the volleyball athletes from Heathfield High played for Black Panthers. And then Heideveld High School. So Saints had 2 feeder schools. They had Cathkin and Heideveld. From me being an ex-Livingstonian, I clearly remember that if you were talented in volleyball at Livingston, you ended up playing for Hurricanes Volleyball Club. And I remember one of my role models at school, Mr. Christians. I can't recall his first name because those years we never knew teachers' first names. We just knew him as Mr. Christians. I had the greatest respect for him. He was one of the stalwarts, and I know that he got a lot of the Livingston High School athletes. The late Sean Henry, I recall, he was a brilliant volleyball player, and I'm almost certain that he ended up playing for Hurricanes Volleyball Club. So the reason why I've put up this slide is this is an example of how a code flourished in the 80s. I'm not too sure when that link was broken, and I'm not an expert in volleyball, but if we can get some kind of link like this going again, not only in volleyball, but in the various codes of sport, we'll be able to grow those clubs. I'm convinced. As DCAS, in sport development, we are trying. We've assisted with the establishment of a number of clubs, and Loet, he's the driver of that, so he can maybe add a comment. He's in charge of that program. We really want to just support. If you're a mod center or a neighboring school in a community, you link up with a community club, and we support that as far as we can. And it's not rocket science. It's not having to reinvent the wheel. It's there. All that we need to do as administrators and as officials is to support that process and to create the opportunity for the learners. So I live on the doorstep of Heathfield High School, and I'm gonna speak now as purely as a Heathfield resident. I'm speaking under correction, but I don't think there's a volleyball ethos at that school anymore. I know they're very involved in athletics, in tennis, in rugby, and in some other codes of sport, but I don't think they are linked to volleyball that much, and I'm just using that as one example. I'm not too sure whether Black Panthers is still operational, but that is for you to thrash out. But I thought I'll just present this one slide just to remind us of how we can actually get clubs to be more functional and to get numbers up. We need to look at the schools, and we need to look at the youth in our communities. And the same happens in other codes of sport. In football, I taught for a number of years in an area called Parkwood. If you lived in Parkwood Estate, if you attended Hyde Park Primary, Montague's Gift Primary, and Parkwood Primary, you either ended up playing for Claude or Southampton. That was it. They trained at the schools. They took the kids from the schools. The late Majid, I can't recall his name, he passed on last year, a postman. He was probably one of the best talent ID officials that you could get, because what he used to do, he used to drive to the schools on his bicycle in the afternoon and come and watch the school matches. And when he saw a talented player, he used to ask, "Speels over the club?" "Niemand hier, right, come speel for Southampton." And that is how they got kids to play, and it still happens. If you go into Parkwood now, you'll still find that most of the football players of Parkwood, they play for Southampton or they play for Claude. I'll move on to slide number 8. I'm mindful of the time. Increasing participation at club level and improving functionality. I've spoken about it already. What can clubs do? They can adopt a school, including volunteer schools. Volunteer schools they're not a mod center, they're not a neighboring school. It's just any school who wants to be participating in sport. So if any school is interested in volleyball, get them up included in the sport leagues through the school sports structure, but ultimately try to link them to a club. Link with the mod centers, and that is where Loet and I will then come in. Link with the neighboring school centers. They are there in the communities. There are, as I said, 181 mod centers across the province and 134 mod centers, 134 neighboring school centers. So that gives you a base of 315 schools, 315, where DCAS, sport development, we have coaches at the schools. So there's an opportunity to link those schools to a club in the community, or for a club to go and adopt that school and get volleyball up and running, especially where you'll find that volleyball is dying in certain areas. The other recommendation is let us not rely on one individual. You know, many times people are saying, yeah, but the teachers are not interested in sport. But I'm sure we all appreciate what's happening in education at the moment, and not only during COVID. It's got to be 2 or 3 people that can drive this process. So if a club wants to adopt a school, it's going to be unsustainable if they go to the school and say, we want your school to play for our club, but the teacher must sort it out. That teacher moves to another school, there's nothing going to happen. Somebody gets promoted, they get more responsibility, they become a deputy principal or principal, sport is going to disappear. So it's about a collective, it's about 3 or 4 people, so that if somebody moves on, somebody else takes over the baton. And then ultimately, for us to create positive and exciting alternatives for the young athletes. That's what we need, because we need to get kids off the streets. It's no good us speaking about gangsterism and drugs, but we're not creating opportunities for the kids. The kids want to be in a team, but they want to be in a team that's going to give them some gees and exciting times. And, you know, playing sport is one of the best ways of doing it. But we've got to be there for the kids and make sure that when they come to a practice, there's somebody there. When they come to play a match on a Saturday, there's a ball and not people running around looking for a pump. I can remember that as a lighty of 8, 9 years old. We want to play the game, but then the manager, the coach forgot that the ball needed to be pumped up. Governance of the club. Obviously, we need to ensure that there's a focus on improving good governance at club level. I got to minimize or eliminate infighting or power struggles. I think the best would be to eliminate, but if we can't, let us try to cut that nonsense down, because that's killing a lot of clubs. We need to take advantage of training opportunities, coaching, managing, administration, whatever courses there are, grab them. And then obviously we need to create some opportunities for our younger leaders. Many clubs, I think, have died because it is Claude running the club for 50 years, and when Claude dies, then the club dies, because Claude didn't want to hand over the baton to the younger generation. We need to try to push that. And obviously for us to have a succession plan so that a club can continue to last for more than 30, 40, 50 years, even if the founder or the president has moved on. We nearly finished, colleagues. Last one is for us just to remember that besides all of the playing and the coaching, we need to provide emotional and psychological support. We need to provide support for our athletes, both at school and club level, to get their self-confidence going up, commitment, goal setting, so we know where we're moving to if we want to become a winning nation, and all the other aspects that's mentioned that you can obviously read through at your own leisure. I'm not going to read everything, but I think the most important one for me is about team cohesion, the second last bullet. We've got to promote the team ethic if we're going to be building clubs and if we're going to be getting school athletes to move through the system so that they can ultimately become our next national players and make our country start winning again. Our last slide, which is slide number 10, we are obviously experiencing some difficult times, but let us move forward one step at a time towards the new normal. I'm going to end up by saying it doesn't matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Let us grow the volleyball clubs, let us grow the volleyball federation, as well as all the other federations in our country and particularly in our province. My last slide is to say, my next slide, my last one, is to say thank you, baie dankie, enkos, shukran. Thank you, colleagues, for allowing me the time.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer, for that very well presented topic. I am sure that I speak for everyone when saying that we appreciate this kind of transparency, because it's only by knowing what our partners are doing and what they want to achieve that we can contribute, buy into the goals and help to make that happen. So thank you very much. I will summarize towards just after Loet's presentation. So let's just give him a chance to do his presentation, and then we can carry on with the discussion and questions if our audience have that. So Loet, I don't think that I need to, as previous, we don't need to introduce you. You are sharing with us the next individual skills, and you can start with telling us more about the dig.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen first. Okay, thank you, Amin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good night. Good evening. Good evening. Just stop something here, please. Am I sharing the right screen?
Yeah, yes.
Let me just check again. Yusuf?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, yes, we can see it.
We can see you.
Okay. Let me just check if. Okay. But it doesn't look, the screen doesn't look right here by me, man.
We can see your presentation.
Your car was there just now. Your yellow car.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we have reached our second topic of the basic skills, which is called the unpause of the dig. Can you see my screen? Oh, something is not right.
Just stay with the car.
Wait.
Yeah, we can see your presentation.
But I can't see it. Okay, I'll carry on without seeing it. Okay, so my introduction to the basic skill. As Western Cape Volleyball Association and executive, we want to have a common approach to teaching the fundamental skills of volleyball across the entire province. Okay, why? Why do we want to achieve this? because we want to follow proven techniques and best practices of the skill acquisition. Okay, so what happens if we don't adopt these practices? If bad techniques is taught to kids, hello?
We still stuck on your first screen where your picture is, so we're not seeing your slides.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying something is not right. Okay, let me just check something again.
Didn't you have two screens?
I do have two screens.
Then perhaps desktop 2, if you can see that one and work with that one. I think that's the presentation you want to share.
Oh.
Loet?
Yeah, I'm checking now, I mean.
Now I'm just, is the one showing the yellow car, is that the one you want to share with us?
Yes, but the screen
Okay.
don't come on there.
Well, we can see it. So maybe you must just carry on with the slides there.
But yeah, you can come closer. I just can't get the slide on the screen, man. You see it now?
No, we're back to.
You see it now, no?
It's the first one.
No, we can't.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, so what happens if we don't adopt the best practices? If bad techniques is taught to kids at a young age, they carry the bad techniques with them throughout their volleyball career. Research shows that bad techniques becomes evident when playing under pressure situations and will let you down when you really depend on it. I remember when I coached at provincial and national teams, we always struggle with some athletes that were never taught the right basics from the start. So that's why at that level we can't still teach technique or basic skills, because if you come at that level, the technique must be taught correct from the beginning. That's why I'm having emphasis on all this basic skills. Okay, so how can we achieve this? Okay, so learn and understand what the best ways are of performing each of the 6 volleyball skills. Learn and understand the best methods for teaching the skills to our kids. Teach and coach the skills using the best methods. So, okay, so this presentation will cover the skill under on pause, where we unpack the points mentioned under how. Okay. Action sequence for under on pause in the ready position. The movement to the ready position is quick and with short steps. When making contact, you must be ready and static with no movement, even if you're not at the right place. That's why the movement should be quick. The player should be behind the ball with one leg ahead of the other. So when you train on court, put emphasis when you're on the right side of the court, the players, let them put their right leg in front. When they're on the left side, put your left leg in front. And when you train off court, they should keep their strongest foot in front. And players normally have a favorite foot to put in front. But teach them to the inside of the ball all the time, so the ball don't go. When they play the ball, it'll always be to the inside. Okay? In the basic body position, okay, the weight is mainly on the balls of the feet. The feet is hip width apart or shoulder width apart. The legs are slightly bent, and the trunk is bent forward, as you see in the pic, as I saw on the screen. With the arms extended and the hands turned, the palm upwards, with the hands glued in each other. That means you put your one hand on top of the other, put your thumbs together so that the arm doesn't fall apart when the ball lands on it. Okay, so that is part of your grip. How to prepare the platform for the ball to land on. By bending the wrists and pushing the shoulders forward, the arms are extended such that the forearms are held together with their wide inner surface forming the contact point. You will get a better platform to dig from and the ball to land on. The arm must be very straight with the elbows locked, and one arm can't be higher than the other. One, then the ball will go skew and not where you intended the ball to go. As you can see in the diagram on the presentation, the tape on the arms is where the ball must land, and the circle on the other peak is also where the ball must land. The ball must not land on the hands or the thumbs. It should be only on the arms. Once you land on the hands, you know the position for the platform wasn't correct. Okay, now I'm going to show you a video around the digs, the right posture, but the video will be in German because of my liaisons with the German Federation. So I will show you the video and I'll just explain some of the video, some part of the video. So this is the underarm pass or digging. The basic movement, as you can see there, quick step. Don't listen to the German language. I can understand German. You see, you must be ready to play the ball. From the basic position, arms straight, as you can see. At your ready position. At your basic ready position as the video stopped there. Weight on the balls of the feet. She's standing a bit flat-footed, but the weight should be on the balls of the feet. Stay behind the ball, as you can see there on the pass. Place your shoulders forward and make your platform straight. Pass the ball. Keep the tension short. See how nice the ball lands on the platform. It shouldn't be on the fingers. Arms and trunk was straight there. Okay, that is the basic how to teach your kids the basic digging position. Okay. Would you play you one more video? It's a short one. It's around the stretching of the arms to the ball and the whole body extends into the ball. Okay, it's a very, very short video. Won't take up much time. Don't worry about the taxi there, the stretching to the ball. Nice stretch arms to the ball. And whole body extends into the ball, as you can see on the pic. Nice posture there. Okay, that's all for now. Just want to show you the digging. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, so the general rule in underarm pass or digging is the lower or faster the ball comes, the lower you must be in the ready position. Some players are lazy and like to stand up straight. You as a coach must drill them from the beginning to bend the knees and stay low. What I normally do, I go stand behind the players. You should see the arms through their legs and not glued together, but always loose from one another. If you don't see the arms, it means they're not bending enough. We were taught to go up and down when I still played volleyball. You must go up and down. That's how we were taught. As the years progressed, I was taught in the next level that you should be down and just come up. That split second of going down and up, it will lose the ball. So you teach them from the start, stay down and just come up into the ball. The object in our trainings and practice is the players should experience the two-handed underarm pass as the most appropriate traveling technique to receive slow and low balls and pass the ball high and accurately to a forward zone in order to make the volley set from a standing position. So what this actually saying is when you pass the ball high enough, the next person mustn't be able to dig set, but able to volley the ball. Always encourage the player to underarm pass or dig with both hands. It must be enforced. If the one hand can get to the ball, the other hand can too. It was always a saying. If you reach with the one hand, get the other hand also to the ball. Okay. Example of games when you practice your digs. Okay, so you as a coach must work out your own games where it just involves the skill you're busy with. You can use 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, and so on. Use a mini volleyball court size like I explained last week with the volley. I don't think you guys remember, but you use a mini size court 4.5 meter by 4.5 meter or 3 meter by 9 meter. And then you just start playing small little games on the court with only using the dig. And normally what I do in the games is the person that keeps the rally the longest wins the game. And then you can progress from on the court triangles, 4 on the side, and you just work digs in the triangle and follow the ball. And my knowledge is you must always be a progression when coaching any skill. Like one was like you alone with the ball, and then you're with a partner, and then you're with 3 people, then you're with 4 people. And so you carry on with the progression. But there's a lot of different drills you can read up. Okay, the learning checklist for the underarm pass. While working for approximately 30 seconds to a minute, you should check if all your players can toss the ball high enough to a hole marking place at 3 meter height to check if the arms are strong enough. Can all players toss the ball accurately more than 10 times to hit the target mark 3 times 1 meter in diameter marked on the hole? Can all players play a dig set more than 20 times in succession at least a meter high to themselves, and then you can only progress. Make small competitions which each player has a ball and let them dig a meter to himself. The person with the most counts wins. Never go to the next exercise or skill acquisition if they can't master the first one. Errors to look for when in the basic position. The player play the ball while moving and not from a static position. A static position is used instead of one foot in front of the other. Weight is on the heels as opposed to the balls of the feet. If you're on the heels, you will lean back instead of playing into the ball, as you saw in the video. Legs extended as opposed to be bent. Yes, get rid of all the bad habits early. They will get lazy to bend the knees and it will become a habit. Very important as a coach to correct mistakes immediately and look for it while in training. Solutions for basic position. First, exercise without the ball to get the posture and technique correct, or just holding the ball in the hands while doing it. Exercise with the ball thrown, later dig and played. Can you see the progression? It's important for the players to observe and correct each other so that they can also learn from other mistakes. Every time you blow the whistle, assume the ready position and play the ball. Working with a partner and later in groups of 3, play balls that are thrown and then dig with different degrees of accuracy and height. For example, throw or dig the ball high and forward. Next, play the ball high to another player who must underarm pass back accurately. Or as above, but initially in pairs and finally in a triangle with very acute angles. The aim is to have a target to dig at the other player's head so that the player can volley. So if you dig to a person and you dig it to the head and the person leaves the volley, it should land on the other person's head. That is how we always train to get accurate digging. Okay, errors in coordination and impetus. Impetus being obtained mainly from the arms instead of the legs. You play the ball only with arms and no legs. Ball played with arms bent instead of straight. Body extension only takes place when or after contact is made with the ball instead of slightly before the ball is hit. Important for you to flow into the ball. The body is extended too early in the action such that the dig is executed at shoulder level instead of hip level. You know, when the ball is dig at shoulder level, it's supposed to be volleyed and not digged. Errors in body relation. Use drills in which the player is kept in low ready position. Work with the player holding a ball between the arms and upper chest while carrying out the dig pass. The player touches the floor with both hands before each reception of the ball. That's the progression. Get the player to call stretch as they carry out the action. It's important to design drills for all the mistakes made. Errors in body relation. The player stands to the side instead of behind the ball. The player is too close or too far from the ball at the point of contact. Remember, the ball is played at arm's length. The players incorrectly judge the flight path of the ball. Then they play the ball at shoulder level, which should be volleyed and not digged, as I said earlier on. Solutions in body relation, okay? It is all similar as in the ready position. Exercise without the ball. I'm just going to mention some few stuff. The player to observe and correct each other. So when the coach blows the whistle, assume a ready position and play the ball again. Working with a partner and later in groups of 3. And so your progression go on. Okay, let me get to my final slide. Okay, so in conclusion, let's teach the skill acquisition correct the first time. Don't be in a hurry to go to the next drill if you didn't master the first one, as I said in one of the slides. If you have a common approach as a province, we will have the same style to conquer. As a coach, be hungry for knowledge. Our kids deserve the best. Thank you. Enjoy teaching the beautiful game. Thank you. Thank you, Amin.
Okay, thank you, Loet, for just reminding us about the importance of teaching good technique, especially at the younger. It's so important to emphasize that at the younger age groups already. So, to our audience, we now open the floor for questions and just discussion around the 2 topics. So, is there any questions relating to the first presentation? Mr. Meyer is now available for any questions anyone of you may have. Do I hear a voice? Is it? I think, Mr. Meyer, you really, have reminded us also just help us to think about what we are actually and how we're actually going to plan around our return to play, or at least return to train conditions, especially with the anxiety around safety. I'm sure that we'll have to think out of the box when we sit around the table as a federation and decide when we are going back to our facilities. How are we going to deal and support our athletes with these anxiety issues that they may have, or even that the parents may have? So that was for me the first one of your slides. You just reminded us about COVID and the situation that we are faced with. Claude, your mute is your just unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Ms. Clute. Look, as I said, we all faced with the same situation, and I think besides the anxiety and all the other issues that we're facing, I think our athletes and even the parents are going to be looking for leadership. We can't have a situation where the government says, okay, amateur sport can return in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, and then we're falling over our feet. We need to obviously be thinking about it. So I want to agree with what you have said there. We really need to be creative. We need to be thinking out of the box. I think this gives us a perfect opportunity to, for lack of a better word, for us to get our ducks in a row. So that when we are ready to go back onto the playing field, well, obviously first to practice, we know exactly what needs to be done besides the medical protocols of, sanitizing and social distancing. But I think it's important that we can't stop speaking to the athletes now, because they're looking for that leadership. They're looking for, even if it is just a message. And it doesn't only have to be our talented athletes, but, Johnny or whoever in the middle of nowhere that wants to become a provincial volleyball player or a national volleyball player may just be feeling lost out there in the middle of nowhere, because there's very little support, and it's not our fault. It's just the situation we find ourselves in. And the priority in life at the moment is, people are afraid of their jobs and losing jobs and their health. But I don't think we should be just sitting back and doing nothing. And I can't preach to volleyball, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, in sport, we need to just keep the wheels moving, even if it's slow, even if it's just a message, even if it is sending a training schedule or just working on our athletes, the emotional being and the psychological being, so that when we are able to go back to training and going to play sport, they're not starting from a deficit point. I think that for me is the most important. Then I've seen one or two questions, one or two comments. There was a question whether the presentation will be shared, and yes, I have emailed it. Previously, I've emailed it to I think to Yusuf and to Loet, and I'm sure it will then be distributed to everybody. And then there was also a question, if I may, through the chair, through the host, Meyer?
Please, you may.
It's just the questions that I've picked up here on the chat. What about support to township schools? As I said, we are supporting sport development. We've got 181 mod centers, and we have 134 neighboring schools. So I've mentioned this figure before, 315 schools. So we are providing equipment, and we're also trying to provide attire, depending on budget, to all those schools, to all 315. But we must just bear in mind that we're looking after 16 priority codes. So you won't find a school getting 16 codes of sport equipment or attire. We obviously have to spread it across the province. So Some schools will get volleyball equipment, some schools will get, football equipment, softball equipment, baseball. But we're chipping away at it slowly but surely. And obviously, if we are able to assist, we will try to assist. But I think I want to maybe just latch on to, I spoke about the establishment of clubs. And it's the project that Loet is in charge of when he wears his DCAS cap and he takes his volleyball federation cap off. We've established 14 clubs. We've assisted the federation to establish 14 new clubs in volleyball in in Cape Winelands. I can send that list to you as well tomorrow. Four new clubs in volleyball has been established in the central Karoo area. One in the Overberg area. And in the metro, we've assisted to establish 6 new clubs in volleyball, just to help the federation to grow the sport. So it's going to take time, as I said, but slowly but surely, if we work together, we will get there. It's not possible to provide, sport equipment to every school, but our focus is on the poorer schools. To answer the question of the delegate, our focus is on providing support to the poorer schools, the historically disadvantaged schools, and that is where the mod centers and the neighboring schools come in. So we get equipment. We always look at the township schools and the poorer schools. We look at the quintile, the quintiles 1, 2, and 3. In some cases, you find a poor school being labeled a quintile 4. That's the way the education, they label the schools from 1 to 5, 1 being the poorest and 5 being your more privileged schools. So we try to look after the poorer schools. So we will continue to do that. I hope that answers that delegate's question. I didn't see any other questions on the chat, unless I've missed that one or two.
I think just perhaps the comment from Ashley Jefter around the lack of, if I interpreted correctly, perhaps games or leagues. And I think that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that possibly you addressed that in the presentation in saying that, if with the establishment of clubs that can assist even in these processes, and not always have to then look at, the school structure to provide leagues, but perhaps the clubs to come in and assist with from an administration point of view, and then to help schools play against each other in that way. I'm not sure if I'm correct there.
Yes, if I may, as I said, it's gonna have to take a team effort. We're gonna have to hold hands, and again, that is where the critical role of the federation comes in. Remember, DCAS, we are there to support. We're not there to run the code of sport. It is the role of the federation to administer and govern the code of sport and participation at all levels, including schools. But we obviously, as a provincial department of sport and recreation, our role is to give whatever support through the federation. So we work through the Western Cape Volleyball Federation, we work through SAFA Western Cape for football, and the other codes of sport. But I think if we can just agree that we're going to be able to work together, and not only COVID, we're all aware of what's happening with the COVID situation, and it's going to be here for some time. But the question is, as I said earlier on, so when we are able to go back to training, what are we going to be doing? If we're going to go back to playing, are our match officials ready? Are they fit? Have they been looking after themselves during the off-season? And obviously the psychological and emotional support that I've spoken about. But ultimately, we need to make sure that the kids they are given the opportunity to play. Some kids, adults as well, we play for fun. We just want to play. But there's other kids or athletes that want to represent our province. They want to represent our country. They want to go to the Olympics. And it's our jobs as sport administrators and officials that are able to provide whatever support we can provide to create that opportunities for them. Mm-hmm. That's really, I think, the only way that I can put it.
Okay, we left with about 5 minutes. So if anybody else wants to contribute to the discussion, please feel free to do so. Any other questions or just comments that you'd like to share with us, guys?
Ms. Clute, I've picked up another question from Sidgy Rule School. I couldn't see who it was, but I saw a comment wanting to know how we can assist. There was a question that popped up. How can we? Maybe the person can just pose that question again.
Oh, was it? Let me just go through the comments. Township, that one I saw, the Ashley. Okay, I don't see that one.
Okay, I've picked up the gist of it. If I may quickly respond.
Please do.
Meyer. I think the question from, I'm not sure if it's an educator or somebody involved in the club. Sidgy Rule, that school is in Grassy Park. I think Mr. Jan is the principal there. I think the question was, how can we support the school to be more involved in sport? If I can recall correctly. So Sidgy Rule is not a mod center, it's not a neighboring school. So what we would deem Sidgy Rule to be is what is called a volunteer school. In other words, the school is willing to participate in sport. And I know that at school they do participate in sport. I'm not sure how involved they are in inter-school sport in the district. But I think certainly if a school is eager to participate in I don't know if it's only volleyball, if it's other codes of sport, they need to make that intention clear to say, we're a school, we're interested in sport, we want to make a commitment that we're going to be playing volleyball or whatever the codes are, and then we will obviously see how we can assist. I need to, however, stress the following, that in the various areas and the various districts, we have focus codes. As I said, we've got 16 codes of sport, and we can't support 16 codes at every school in the province. I mean, it's just impossible. So in the area of Sidgy Rule, the 4 focus codes there, it's baseball for the boys, softball for the girls, football and futsal, and hockey. But I do know that volleyball is one of the secondary codes in the area, because volleyball is going to be played at the Lavender Hill Sport Complex, the shared facility. There's a lovely hall that's being built there at Prince George Primary. So if Sidgy Rule, for example, as a school wants to become involved in volleyball as well, they need to show that commitment and link up with existing leagues that's being run by the educators under the auspices of the federation. And then we can then obviously, without making commitments, to see how we can support. But it's important that if schools are willing to participate in sport, that they need to show that intention. We can't have a situation where a school is saying to us, first build a field, and we don't have that budget, and first give us A, B, and C, and then we're going to play sport. They must first show the intention of wanting to play sport. And that is where we will work hand in hand with the federation at the district level and see how we can support that school. I think, and that goes for any other school and for any other code as well.
Totally, yes. So if there isn't any other comments, colleagues, then this brings us to the end of tonight's session. It only leaves me with thanking our 2 presenters again for the wonderful presentations. I'm sure we can leave here knowing a little bit more than what we arrived with. And so don't forget to tune in next week again. Our 2 topics, as usual, will have a generic theme. Mr. Paul Hendricks will share with us how to develop a champion mindset. And then Mr. Mark Williams, one of our federation coaches and club coaches, will talk to us about mini volleyball and movement skills required for volleyball. So with that said, guys, thank you very much for tuning in every week diligently, for your support, the loyalty shown. We really appreciate it. And as always, if there is any questions that you have with regards to how we can support, how we can help you, then please share it with us via email or any of the group the WhatsApp group formats or spaces. So good evening, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. And it was lovely chatting and seeing you guys again.
Thank you very much to the host for a job well done, and thank you, Yusuf, for the technical support, and thank you to all the delegates for listening patiently.
Mr. Meyer, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good night.
Guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Almin.
Thank you very much.
Hallo Sally. Sally weg.
1 minute to 9 on time. Night, night.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Yusuf.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you,
Yusuf,
Mr. Meyer.
where's Bobby? Where's Bobby tonight?
No, he sent me a message earlier and said he said he's in another workshop and he might pop in here. So, yeah.
Bobby was Black Panthers, wasn't it?
Yeah, he actually started at Black Panthers, yeah.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
All the girls at the Immaculata ran to that club.
Yeah, no, he was a pioneer there at Black Panthers back in the day.
No, I remember. Your volleyball we must get volleyball back in to that level, man.
He was actually was a member of the first provincial team, the Western Province provincial team back in the day. Yeah.
No, I know Bobby. I know Bobby from not only from football, but I know that he played volleyball at a very high level. No, I remember.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
As I said, I was at Livingston High, but they threw me off the bus when it came to volleyball.
Yeah. No, Gershwin also comes from Livingston. He was also in the
Yes.
tonight. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Yeah. There was another Gershwin from Livingston as well that played volleyball.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but
just,
that's a very, very good topic that you presented tonight. It's very interesting. And I think,
we gotta just take it one step at a time. But
one step at a time, yeah. Sometimes you get impatient, but then you must, like you said, you must just realize, it's not a quick win. It's going to take a while for us to get to that point again. And
Yusuf,
I guess, yeah.
Sorry, I'm listening.
Yeah, and I say, we want to get it back to the way it was back in the day, but we also realize that we're getting older as well, so we will never actually experience it in the same way, you know what I mean? But it's about creating the opportunities for the next generation and trying to get them to experience what we experienced back then,
Exactly.
And, so, I should have commented about this previously, but perhaps we can have a chat about it. Your one slide about this, from the schools into the clubs, one of the main things, in my opinion, there was the teachers, that were, perhaps it was a coincidence, but all of the schools that you listed over there had teachers that were actually directly involved with the clubs.
Yes,
so that was that automatic kind of glue that kind of kept things together all those years, And there was also a common purpose back then. The common purpose was obviously to create a society that was, free from the oppressors, and so perhaps we need to all look at a common goal again for ourselves going forward, and it's something we all fight for. And obviously there are things already prevalent, that we can take as that, like in society.
Look, from my side, I was very fortunate going to a school like Livingston, and I remember clearly that Mr. Christians got you to play volleyball. Mr. Yahya Birch got you to play for Retreat Rugby Club, and we had different links. But anyway, we'll chat again.
We'll chat again. Yeah, but thanks again.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay,
bye-bye.
Claude, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.